be here.
Excellent.
And kind of funny enough, the space that I'm in was my first maker space, which we called Dad's Garage.
Nice.
And so this is where I absolutely cut my teeth on anything making. My computer is jammed between a table grinder and a table saw. So it feels quite appropriate that I've kind of cycled back to this zone. So
there you go. As you should, as it should be, right? Feels good. Actually, I think it was kind of, I don't know how all this was working out, but it's sort of nice going from Billy into your section.
Oh, good.
So maybe you can, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. And you've been gracious enough also to share your session with our friends from Microtonal Guitar. Yeah. So they're going to pop in about 20 minutes.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, yeah, thank you for having me. My specialty is a musical instrument that's called a handpan. It's relatively new. It was invented about 20 years ago in Switzerland. So in the world of kind of established musical instruments, it's brand new. It's an infant, which to get in early on something like that has been an absolute joy. I started playing them in 2007. It was kind of a slow rollout from Europe to kind of make it over to the States. So I'm located in California. Typically I'm in Sonoma County, so north of San Francisco, but today I'm hailing from Southern California in South Orange County, which is my hometown. And so it took a long time for these instruments to kind of naturally find their way to the Americas. There was a few distributors that helped. So I started playing them, and for the most part, just was very content to enjoy playing them. And then I witnessed somebody tune them, and I was hooked. I had no idea what had happened. My background is in Western classical music. I grew up as a cellist, so I was trained with a good ear. So I could hear what the tuner was doing and how they were manipulating the harmonics and partials, but I had no idea how they were doing it. It was like witnessing black magic in real life. So after that, I was really intrigued about how these instruments worked. From at that time, say 2010, there were very few people around the world who had the skill and talent to tune these. So there was also a great need for tuners to develop. So both kind of desire and need kind of ran together. And I spent a year kind of by myself in a room, just figuring out how it worked. It was mainly, I worked on 55-gallon barrels. These instruments, their launching point was from the steel pan from Trinidad. So going back to the barrel was for me, a very obvious way to learn the basics of tuning. And then after that, once I learned to tune, I started developing my own instruments. And so since 2013 up until present day, I've been in production of handpans. And so what I'm going to show you guys today, it's a pretty deep art form. But what I'm going to show you today is kind of either the final step of finishing an instrument or fixing of an instrument that has been knocked out of tune. That's another big part of my job. These instruments are sensitive. And so it's not terribly uncommon that a microphone stand falls on it, it gets bumped into the car. And actually, as soon as I'm off of this Zoom call, I have someone showing up with an instrument that's out of tune. They heard that I was going to be in Southern California, and that was close enough for them to drive to me. So I will literally get off this call and then fix an instrument. So what I have here is one of my completed instruments, and I'll give you a quick sample. So this one is ready to go. It will ship out to, I think this one goes to somewhere in Canada next week. But in the interim, I am going to actively knock a note out of tune, and then we will fix it. So Cher, if you just let me know if I'm doing this right, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what I look at while I tune, and I can talk about these programs. So let's do this right. Okay, how does that look? Good, but busy. Okay, so I have two separate programs running right now. The orange one will look on the far left of the screen. That's going to be the main one that we're going to be looking at. And it's showing me three things. And once I stop talking and I play a note, it'll kind of register. But the bottom band here, so there's three bands that each act like a guitar tuner. If it's going to the right, it's sharp. If it's going to the left, it's flat. So each one of these notes, we call them tone fields. They have three frequencies tuned, and it's just a piece of metal that's been put under the right amount of curvature, surface area, and tension to get it to go into tune. So this one is an A4. So I'm going to switch to A4, and we should see this left-hand screen light up green. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing that all three frequencies are in tune and within the ballpark of being in tune. And so the bottom band is the fundamental, which that would be an A4. The middle band, which I'll jog it here just to map it, is an A5, so an octave. And then the top band is the fifth above the octave, or in this case, it is an E6. So that's all coming directly from this note. And if I kind of walk around the whole scale, you can see each note. There's a G. And you'll see there is some variance in what frequencies are there and how perfectly in tune they are. When you get into the fine tuning of these instruments, there's a lot of number fudging, a lot of gray that you get to play in. And that actually kind of becomes the tuner's kind of artistic style. So what I'm going to do now is what I never advise anybody to do. Please never do this without permission or guidance. Is I'm going to take this note. And this is my tuning hammer. It's a 24-ounce ball peen hammer. And I'm going to knock this note out of tune. So this is like the giant no-no, but for demonstration purposes, here we go. All right, so now we have a note that's terribly out of tune. Let's analyze it. So we can see that everything went sharp. So the goal now is going to be able to walk everything back into tune. It becomes complicated because you have to walk all three back into tune, and some of them have relationships where they want to move together. Some of them have relationships where they want to move opposite of each other. So let's get started. The other thing I'm going to do is I usually walk around with a pocket full of magnets, and I'm going to put these on the notes that have relationships with this note so I can kind of quiet any sympathy that might want to happen for now. So these magnets are going to be placed accordingly. And this usually becomes kind of like which sheep is the furthest out of the pen. Which one is the furthest out? We're going to try to bring that one in first. And it looks like that middle band there is kind of the one that's most out. So there is a funny thing about these hammers is that they all have really short handles. And the reason being is because these instruments have a hole in the bottom. And the majority of the fine tuning is done from within inside the instrument. So I have to reach in, which I'll do now. And essentially, I'm just going to try to undo what's been done and put this thing back in tune. So we're going to go hunting for that octave. So the octave is the middle band that's presenting at maybe 55 cents sharp. So, all right, so that was one hammer strike. Ooh, we definitely got a piece of it. And it would appear that the octave is still the one that's the most out. So we'll hunt for that again. Didn't really get it, but the bottom one, the fundamental, did walk in. So we're going to try another tactic. So adjustments on the octave happen along the long axis of this note. So if they're elliptical, it's a bit hard to see, but there is a long and short axis. So if I'm doing adjustments on the octave, I'm kind of looking to adjust any kind of contours or tension along this long axis. So let's try that again. Okay, so we maybe got too much there. I think just sitting flat. This is not terrible news because we can probably walk the two bottom ones, the fundamental and octave, that are flat. We should be able to walk them back up together And in doing so, we might be able to get that top band, the fifth, we might be able to get that to kind of come down with it. So this is going to become a little bit more gentle. All right, so you see we got that octave right in there. But now we have the problem that the fundamental is flat and the top band, that fifth, is sharp. So we're going to try another tactic here. We're going to try to, right now there's curvature in the note kind of this way. So we're going to take that curvature and kind of reduce it a little bit. And that might just be the trick to get these two to line up. And hopefully we don't mess up the octave again. Well, we got those two in, but we messed up with the octave. So now we're going to try, we'll try one other trick here. So once again, we're a little bit closer. The octave, that middle band, is just about right. That top band, the fifth, just about right, but we lost the fundamental again, that bottom one. So we'll see if we can just bump it up just a little. Oh, too much. So we're going to try to immediately undo that. Ooh, we're very close. I mean, this is almost acceptable. We'll see if we can bring up that bottom band just a hair. It just doesn't quite want to. We'll try again. And now we have messed up the top band, so we'll try to undo that. So this is kind of the art of fine tuning. What we're doing is we're just currently manipulating one tone field, which is complicated enough. It becomes way more complicated when you start dealing with all 8 tone fields. And then it kind of doubles or triples in complication in that some of these notes have relations with the other notes. And so not only do you have to have this one working kind of as a single note, but it also is going to have to be working with its harmonic partners across the instrument. So within one instrument here, I'm dealing with anywhere from 24 up to 30 frequencies, all tuned on this one piece of metal. So let's finish this one. It's just that upper band now. It's +9, which is just a little too sharp. And that's really close. I still don't love the octave being +4. So we're going to see if we can just walk that down. Not quite. Still not quite. We'll try one other trick here. I'm just going to push down on that octave axis from the inside. I almost like that. And I'll accept that. And the reason I say I'll accept that, even though the octave and the fifth are sharp, I'd much rather have them leaning sharp. Natural frequencies and strings tend to generate a little bit sharp as you go higher in the higher partials. This being the highest note of the instrument, I also don't mind if it's leaning a little bit sharp. And I say that's okay for now in that I'll continue tuning notes and then I'll start analyzing their relationships. So this is an A4, there's an octave lower, A3 on here. And I'm gonna wanna see what their relationship is before I make the final call on the instrument. And I may have to come back to this A4 and maybe I want the fundamental up 2 cents, or maybe I want it 2 cents flat to either encourage or discourage any of the kind of positive or negative relationships that they could have. So this is where the waters become very muddy in terms of there really is no correct answer. The tuner of this instrument, of a handpan, they kind of get to make the final call of where they want to leave the instrument in both it being in tune, the instrument itself being healthy, and also they just kind of get to leave their artistic, tuning signature on it of where they like to have harmonics based on their personal preference. It becomes one more level complicated if you get a customer who has very specific requests or desires that may be different than your general preferences as a tuner. So someone may want things super tight and a lot of sympathy. Some people may want an instrument to be much drier and not a lot of sympathy. So those are some of the complexities. So with that note back in tune, kind of give it a check. So I'm going to take these magnets off and we'll see how it sounds. It's pretty good. I actually might take it up a little bit sharp, but I can do that. I can do that later on. So yeah, that's some of the complexity of tuning. There are other things going on the screen here that I didn't talk about, and I can make a brief mention to them. I have the same program here running in the middle, and it sits 2 octaves higher than any note I'm tuning. It's just a way for me to keep an eye on any other frequencies or extra partials that might be being generated by either the material or the specific note. So it's just kind of a secondary screen for me to, keep an eye on stuff that sometimes shows up. And then lastly, the screen all the way to the right is a spectrum analyzer. And this one's really great for these instruments because it will show everything all at once. So if I stop talking and play one of these notes, you can see there's specific peaks that are showing up. And if I zoom in on one, it's now telling me that I'm looking specifically at E4, or excuse me, E5. And if I zoom a little bit over to the right, I'll look at its 5th, which should be a B. Yeah, and there's B5 sitting there. So it's just another way for me to kind of have an actual visual of what's going on. When I started tuning, I tended to trust the computer first, the instrument second, and my ear third. And at some point in my career, those things flip-flopped, where suddenly I really kind of trust my ear first, the instrument second, and then I often just have the computer for reference. Yeah, that's kind of the ins and outs of tuning. The main variables we play with when tuning, I mentioned a few of them. One is just surface area. The bigger the note, the more material that is there, it is vibrating, that's going to generate lower frequencies. Smaller note, smaller surface area, that's going to make higher frequencies. And then we use curvature. So within these notes, it's subtle, but there is, I guess for layman terms, there's a Pringle shape, curvature in kind of opposite directions. And that's how we're able to manipulate the different harmonics. We can isolate it because of that anti-curvature. The big term for that is anticlastic hyperbolic paraboloid, but Pringle is the easiest way to think of it. And then the last one is we play with different types of tension. The biggest one is compressive tension. So these tone fields here, we have hammered them down in the rough tuning stage, and we've compressed that material. And in compressing the material, we make the frequencies go flat. So one question I get is, how often do these instruments need to be retuned? I usually say every 1 to 2 years. It depends on what you're doing. But if I tuned one of these and then just put it on the shelf, it would naturally and slowly release compressive tension and go sharp over time. And we also play with kind of what I think of as like a string tightening tension. Imagine you're tightening a guitar string. We can also kind of draw and release that type of tension across these notes for tuning as well. And I think one thing that's fascinating is every tuner is a little bit different. I equate it to if you had 3 good painters and you said, please create this shade of green, please mix the shade of green. They all would probably be able to do it, but where one might use a little more white, another one might compensate with a little more yellow. So as tuners, we're all able to do this job, but we all kind of play with the variables that I've described and their relationships a little bit differently. So one interesting challenge is when you end up working on somebody else's instrument and you kind of get introduced to their tuning style by just jumping in and hammering on their instrument. So yeah, so after this call, I will be working on an instrument that was shipped from Austria to San Diego, and at some point in transit was knocked out of tune. It is both a maker I'm unfamiliar with and a material I'm unfamiliar with, so it should be a learning adventure. Yeah, so that's it for me. So these are hand pans.
Nice.
The top has the note, the bottom has the hole on the bottom.
Hey, Colin, I think people want to see more of the pan too.
Absolutely.
So maybe if you could take the tuner off, yeah.
Absolutely.
And maybe you've got 2 minutes. Maybe you could just do a little something for us.
If I can figure out how to stop, there we are.
There you go.
All right, yeah, let me back up and I can play for you guys.
Yeah, a quick little one would be great, and then we'll perfect. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording on this one. You do have in the comments